President's decision. Our James Soreen, Chief Executive of the Britain-Israel Communications and Research Centre, and from Washington, Republican strategist James Norton. Thank you very much both for your time. The accusations of the lifting of sanctions, James Norton, giving Iran the ability to export terrorism across the region, is that a fair one?
You know, I think that this is probably going to be one of the most important decisions that President Trump has made at this point in his 10 months as president. And so I think, you know, it's critical that he comes across with a clear, concise message in terms of what exactly he wants to occur, because obviously have the issue with North Korea, we have the issue with the Russians, we have the issues in other parts of the world, and I think that, you know, this is a big challenge for him, and for him to be able to come across that this is what he wants to have happen. He was contradicted earlier this week or last week by Secretary James Mattis of the Defense Department supporting the deal and wanting to have, you know, things in place. And so I think that this is kind of an eggshell type situation for the president, where he really needs to have his staff supporting his position, and then he needs to be very clear to the world in terms of how he's going to work with the Iranians.
When this does get kicked to Congress, what risks are posed there?
You know, I actually think that Congress, in this case, is probably going to want to work with the administration in terms of, it seems like decertify, but yet not move forward with sanctions. Certainly the White House, through the Treasury Department, has authority to issue sanctions if they want to, but I don't think at this point there's a momentum on the Hill to necessarily move through sanctions. You know, Bob Corker, who's the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, was, you know, as President Trump mocked him for, but was actually, you know, part of the deal several years ago, supports it, and I haven't seen any signals to this point that they're going to move through, you know, additional sanctions. And, you know, even if there was a congressional fix that was needed, I think that's another area where President Trump is, you know, finding himself in a little bit of trouble in terms of relationships, openly fighting with chairmen of committee, chairmen of his own party, and so whatever's announced today is going to have to be, you know, probably stand as is, at least for the time being, unless there's able to work out some sort of a deal behind the scenes longer term. But at this point, I don't necessarily see that happening. And obviously, you know, Theresa May, you know, weighing in with the president and wanting him to, you know, work with stability in the region was obviously, I think, an important point, and something that hopefully he'll listen to some of the allies in terms of why this deal needs to have some of the tenets, you know, remain in place and have that open dialogue.
If he does say what we expect him to say, what will the reaction be from the other signatories to this deal? Britain, France, Germany, China, Russia?
You know, I think from the standpoint of one thing that's important to note, one of the key tenets of Trump's campaign was that he was very critical of intervention in Iraq and Afghanistan, and really basically said that he wouldn't have gone that way, you know, had he been president at the time. And so I think that it clearly is a signal to the region that he's not interested in necessarily any type of force or troops on the ground or any type of engagement on that level. So I think if that's already been laid out by him, you know, earlier in the campaign, and I think that's still true today, despite, you know, a slight ramp up in Afghanistan, you know, of a few thousand advisors last month, I think it does kind of say, okay, well, it's going to have to happen at the negotiating table or happen with, you know, working with allies. He's obviously pushed NATO pretty hard in terms of coming to the table and spending more money and resources and that kind of stuff. So I think he's probably going to still continue to go in that direction. He's still going to want to, you know, work out some sort of deal, you know, longer term, and that I would agree that this is some sort of negotiating tactic in terms of Twitter diplomacy, if you will, putting out some certain messages, you know, kind of on the net, and then, you know, working some things behind the scenes.